Trevor! Trevor? He's not here. I'm here. Right. Right, I'm here. You're okay. It's okay. You were asleep. I was asleep. It was a nightmare, a dream. I see blue. I see orange. I see green. I see white. I feel my bedsheet. I feel my pillow. I feel my skin. I'm in my bedroom. It's okay. I'm okay. I am okay. It's good. Where's my journal? November 9th, 2018. Nightmare. Went to bed around 11 p.m. Evening was okay. No drugs, no alcohol, no stress. No television after 10. Woke up at 2:35 with the same nightmare. I was in Kandahar with Trevor and the commander.
Welcome to our Remembrance Day ceremony. In keeping with Indigenous protocol and building respectful relationships between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal peoples in Canada, it is customary to acknowledge the traditional territories and ancestral lands of Aboriginal peoples. I would like to acknowledge that this school is situated upon traditional territories. The territories include the Wendat Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, Mississauga of Scugog, Hiawatha, Outerville First Nation, and the Métis Nation. The treaty that was signed for this particular parcel of land is collectively referred to as the Williams Treaties of 1923, and it applies to lands east of Woodbine Avenue. I would also like to recognize the enduring presence of Aboriginal peoples on this land.
It was a war to end all wars, the poetic end to World War I on the 11th day of the 11th month and the 11th hour. 100 years have passed since the end of the First World War, and Remembrance Day has become a day of remembrance for the men and women who have served and continue to serve our country during times of war, conflict, and peace. The First World War was fought from 1914 to 1918 and was the bloodiest war the world had ever seen up to that time. After the outbreak of the war, the fighting in France and Belgium soon turned into a stalemate of trench fighting. The Western Front was a string of trenches stretching from the North Sea to the Swiss border, with the Allied and German armies facing one another across a harsh no-man's land of barbed wire, shell craters, and mud. It would be 1918 before a major breakthrough on the Western Front finally came. As the war progressed, Canada's successes in battles like those of Vimy Ridge and Passchendaele had earned its army the reputation for being the best attacking Allied troops on the Western Front. Canada's 100 Days is a name given to the series of attacks made by Canadian Corps during August 8th and November 11th, 1918, during the 100 Days Offensive of World War I. During this time, the Canadian Corps fought in several battles throughout France and Belgium. More than 100,000 Canadians advanced 130 kilometers and captured approximately 32,000 prisoners, and nearly 3,800 artillery pieces, machine guns, and mortars. More than 6,800 Canadians and Newfoundlanders were killed and approximately 39,000 wounded during the last 3 months of fighting. By the end of the First World War, Canada, more than 650,000 men and women served in uniform. The conflict took a great toll, with more than 66,000 Canadians and Newfoundlanders dying and 170,000 being wounded. The sacrifices and achievements of those who gave so much in the effort to restore peace and freedom are not forgotten. It was the war to end all wars, yet many of our soldiers came home physically and mentally wounded from the war. Many soldiers came home suffering shell shock, or what we would call today PTSD. They would forever be changed and impacted by the events they experienced in World War I. Today, we have a better understanding of the impact of war on our soldiers, and are better able to help soldiers who return from war suffering from PTSD. Sadly, however, many of our men and women in the armed forces return from missions abroad changed, and their sacrifice continues long after they've returned home.
Okay, let's start over. 3, 2, 1, action.
When did you graduate from Bethune?
I graduated in 2006, 2007.
And when did you enlist?
I joined with a group of my friends actually in grade 11, when I was 17.
What branch or division did you serve with?
I joined the Army, the Combat Engineers, and then I moved to Land Force Central Area Headquarters.
Where did you serve and how long did you serve for?
Served mostly in Canada, did a stint in the United States, Europe, and I was in the Army for 9.5 years of my life.
Why did you want to join the military?
That's, I guess I was young, dumb, and stupid. 17. Most guys my age, the guys that I served with, we all had the same reasoning. You know, we wanted to do something. We wanted to do something exciting. And I guess the other reason was something I always wanted to do.
What were your jobs or responsibilities when you were in the armed forces?
As a combat engineer, I had multiple roles, but specifically retrained mostly for what we call counter improvised explosive device disposal. So if you've ever seen the movie The Hurt Locker, the guys in the bomb suits, that's mostly what we did.
Did you ever see any active combat, or were you scheduled to be deployed for active combat?
I was scheduled to be deployed in 2007, 2008. Unfortunately, I was actually injured before I got to go.
While you were unable to go because of injury, did you know of any other people who ended up in active service?
Yes. Knew of a lot of guys who went. So when I got injured, I was pretty angry, pretty disappointed because, it's not like we have a bloodlust or anything. It's just because, you've been training for so long, you want to put it into practice, and it's also about the brotherhood, your friends are going and you want to make sure that they come back in one piece.
So were there any casualties amongst the people who went that you were close to, and what were the extent of those casualties?
Yeah, there were quite a few. I guess you can call him a casualty. A good friend of mine, he killed himself in 2014. Guys that I know came back, not all there. Like you talked to them and you knew like something was off about them. Other guys came back with shrapnel. Guy lost his arm. Another guy lost his leg. Yeah.
What memory or memories from your time in the military are most vivid?
Probably having to bury my best friend in September 2011. It's something that you see in the movies and the TV screens, and you don't really think that it's gonna happen, but when you're there in the moment, it's sort of like surreal. It's sort of like a dream, like a really bad dream. yeah, all I remember that day is just standing there as this casket was being put 6 feet under. And then, I mean, then a couple years down the road, you know, wound up losing another friend and another friend. But yeah, that's probably the only memory I have of my military service.
How have you managed to adjust to civilian life since leaving the military?
Like a lot of guys my age, it was rough. Not gonna lie, it was pretty rough. A lot of us joined when we were 17, 18. You know, left the military, not a lot of jobs offered, you know, a career with someone who's just with high school diploma, right? With just a high school education. I bounced around from job to job for a couple of years. You know, I do like a month there, 2 months there, 3 months there, 6 months there. It was just hard, because in the Army, you knew exactly where you had to be every second of every day, and you had a purpose. When you leave, you lose that sense of purpose. No one's checking up on you. You know, no one's there for you anymore. So for a lot of us, it's sort of like your home has been taken away from you, and we struggled. A lot of us struggled. A lot of us continue to struggle. I guess you could say I'm one of the lucky ones. Got hired by a police service, and I traded one uniform for another.
Why is Remembrance Day important to you?
It's important for me personally because, I mean, with society, with, you know, social media and stuff like that, with your busy life schedule, you tend to forget. Well, you never really do, but your friends, you tend to put them on the back burner for a couple months, and then Remembrance Day comes. It's sort of like, excuse my language, oh shit, you know, they're still there, you know. The memories you'll always have, even as their faces start to fade away, and it's good to relive the memories, whether it's bad, whether it's good, whether it's funny. And for me, Remembrance Day is also like a mini reunion. You know, we all get together on the Saturday, and we all just share stories. You know, we all just laugh, and yeah, we drink, but we drink to the guys like Danny Siklos and Adam Shepard and Camille Martinez's, and the guys who never came back, the guys who were invincible, who we thought were invincible, and they're not here with us today.
That's it.
The mission of Canadian Armed Forces members is to defend our country, its interests, and its values while contributing to international peace and security. They serve in many capacities at home and throughout the world, carrying on Canada's proud military tradition. Over the years, many Canadian Armed Forces veterans have served overseas in a variety of United Nations, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and other multinational task forces. International peace missions often have positive effects, but the strife, conflict, and death that can surround these efforts is not always easy to handle. Being separated from friends and family for months at a time, the possibility of witnessing extreme violence and cruelty, of having to use force or have force used against you, and the realization that you could be killed or wounded while carrying out your duties are some of the experiences that many Canadian Armed Forces veterans know well. Following these terrible conflicts and high casualties of World War I and World War II, in which more than 110,000 Canadians died, Canada and other countries felt that it was better to try to prevent wars when possible than fight them. Canada's commitment to international peace efforts and other overseas military actions has continued. Some of the places Canadians have served include Egypt, Cyprus, Syria, the Persian Gulf, the former Yugoslavia, Somalia, Haiti, Rwanda, Ethiopia and Eritrea, East Timor, and Afghanistan. Canadian peacekeepers have been called upon to monitor ceasefires, patrol buffer zones, act as an intermediary between clashing groups, clear landmines, investigate war crimes, protect refugees, and provide humanitarian assistance. The role of the Canadian Armed Forces now involves all aspects of peace support, including peacemaking and peace building. More than 125,000 Canadian Armed Forces members have served in dozens of international peace missions to more than 35 countries over the past 6 decades. Approximately 130 Canadians have died in these efforts, and many more have suffered physical and mental injury. Canadian Armed Forces veterans have made many personal and global achievements, and have made personal sacrifices to defend Canada's interests and its values, while contributing to international peace and security. These men and women take their honored place in our country's military history beside their fellow veterans and fallen comrades of Canada's earlier war efforts. Their commitment has earned Canada a worldwide reputation as a country that supports and protects peace. The symphonic band, under the direction of Mr. Ross, will perform To a Distant Place.
The Veteran by Margaret Postgate Cole. He came upon him, sitting in the sun, blinded by war, and left. And past the fence there came young soldiers from the Hand and Flower, asking advice of his experience. And he said this and that, and told them tales. And all the nightmares of each empty head blew into air. Then hearing us beside, poor chaps, how'd they know what it's like, he said. We stood there and watched him as he sat, turning his sockets where they went away, until it came to one of us to ask, "And you're how old?" 19, the 3rd of May.
Leave me alone! I said, leave me alone. Don't talk to me. Don't come in here. Don't ever talk to me. Just leave me alone! It's okay. You're okay. I'm here. Where? In my bedroom. In my apartment. At home? I see blue. I see orange. I see green. I see white. I don't see red. No red. I'm holding ice packs. Only ice packs. And water. I hear quiet. I hear my bedroom. Tara and Steve are in the living room. They're okay. We're okay. I have a soldier's heart. I have battle fatigue. I have shell shock. I have nothing. Trevor was my best friend. We met in the 2nd grade. We would play sports together, sleep over at each other's houses, go to summer camp. He was my buddy. We ended up joining the Army together. One day, while we were on our way back to the base, we were almost there, but we saw this woman, and she was covered in blood. So our group stopped to decide whether or not we should help her. We decided to help. The first 4 out, Trevor was one of them, got out and took up position. I approached the woman to try and speak to her. She was cut up pretty bad. And I don't know what she was doing on the side of the road, but she needed a doctor. So I told the commander, and he radioed for help while I tried to stop some of the bleeding. Then I heard this sound. I felt it really, an explosion. I looked over and Trevor wasn't there. He was gone. He was 4 meters back, lying on the ground, screaming on the ground. And his legs were gone. So I hid the lady behind the tank and I ran to Trevor, but I tripped over one of his legs running to him. He was shouting at me to get out of there. I told him it would be okay. I don't think he believed me. But that's when the shooting started. They shot him while he was lying there. And I think they were aiming for me. So I took what was left of him and I ran back to the tank. I got him and the lady back inside, and I wanted to go back for his legs. But the commander told me that there was no point. So we left them there, on the side of the road. My best friend since grade 2 died 9 hours later, with me by his side and bullets in him that were meant for me. He was only 19. I was only 19. I'm in my bedroom. I'm at home. I see blue. And I see red. I see red everywhere. That wasn't even the worst thing I saw. It was one of the first things I saw, but it wasn't the worst. In France, I was sinking in the mud, and when I finally stopped sinking, I realized it was only because I was standing on somebody who had drowned in the mud days earlier. I was peacekeeping in Rwanda when I came across a mass grave of school children. School children. I saw dead bodies that were rigged to explode if you touched them in Korea. In Afghanistan, I saw a soldier, well, I heard it as much as I saw it, kill a man with an axe. And I have attended the funerals of those who've come back, but who couldn't come back. These bodies, our side, their side, civilians, when they're dead, there's no difference. People are the same. People are the same. Except for me. I am not the same. I was in the park the other day, and I started crying when I saw a helicopter fly by in the distance. I have a soldier's heart. We remember the fallen, lest we forget the living fallen. I'm only 19, and I have a soldier's heart.
In late 1941, Japan had entered the Second World War on the side of the Axis. It quickly invaded and occupied large swaths of Southeast Asia, territories that were belonging to the Allies. Many of these areas had once been British, French, and Dutch colonies, where in modern day, these countries would be Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Burma, Singapore. And Britain was desperately trying to find a way to infiltrate the region. They had found some success in occupied Europe when Special Operations Executive trained and dropped secret agents into and behind enemy lines throughout Europe. The role of these agents was to organize and support local resistance fighters and help with espionage and sabotage of infrastructure and German supply lines and equipment. However, Southeast Asia presented some unique challenges to SOE. It was a vast area to cover with many islands, challenging physical terrain, and very diverse population and languages. The SOE soon realized that Caucasian agents would stand out too much and would struggle to gain local trust. The answer to this question, of course, lay with Chinese Canadians. They could easily blend into the population. They could speak Cantonese, and there were loads of these men waiting for an assignment. In the early years of the war, many young Chinese Canadian men had walked into recruitment offices, but found no luck trying to get in. Generally, they were told, "We can take your name, but you are not likely to be called up because you are Chinese," and then they were promptly shown the door. Suddenly, they were the perfect recruit, and their services were needed, but in a way that would require them to swear to secrecy, lest they have a high possibility of being killed. Between 1944 and 1945, about 150 Chinese Canadians were recruited and quietly seconded to the British SOE in Southeast Asia. They became known as members of Force 136. The mission of Force 136 members was simple: get dropped behind Japanese lines, survive in the jungle in small teams with no outside support, seek out and train local resistance fighters, and work with those guerrilla groups to sabotage Japanese equipment and supply lines and conduct espionage. To do this kind of work would require much more than their basic army training. The men would need to learn commando warfare techniques. Over the course of several months, they learned such skills as stalking, silent killing, demolition, jungle travel, and survival, wireless operations, espionage, parachuting, interpretations, and silent swimming. Eventually, each recruit became a specialist in demolition, wireless operations, and interpretation, and a wide variety of fields. In each field, teams were small and generally consisted of no more than 8 men. First and second commanders, 2 demolition experts, a wireless operator, a coder and decoder, and 2 Gurkha scouts were assigned to most fields.
The first group to be formed were 13 handpicked men who were assigned to a mission with the ominous title Operation Oblivion. Their initial goal was to go into China, but the Americans vetoed those plans. They endured 3 months of exhausting training at a secret temporary camp at Commando Bay on Okanagan Lake. Training continued in Australia on Fraser Island, where the men were attached to the Australian Army. By January 1945, the remaining Chinese Canadians had been recruited. The first of these men were shipped to India via England. Others followed them over the next few months. About 15 men were selected to go to Australia to join Operation Oblivion. Most recruits were not fully deployed before Japan officially surrendered on August 15, 1945. Some had the chance to do short trips into occupied territory. One young Force 136 member in India, Neil Chan of Vancouver, described one of these short missions, which was nevertheless nerve-wracking for him. About 14 men found themselves operating behind Japanese lines for several months in Burma, Borneo, Malay, and Singapore. Most stayed in the field well into the autumn of 1945. The goals in the resistance groups they contacted varied. Generally, missions ranged from supporting and training local fighters in sabotage activities to forcing Japanese units to surrender, finding and liberating prisoner of war camps, and maintaining order and security post-surrender. Captain Roger Cheng took in the very first group of Force 136, Chinese Canadian men. In March 1945, he was sent into Borneo with Roy Chan, Louis King, Norman Low, and James Shu. Their mission included contact and befriend DAC headhunters, provide equipment and training, assist with sabotage, locate isolated Japanese units and force them to surrender, find prisoner of war camps, arrange tribesmen into local security forces, patrol rivers, and prevent revenge massacres of Japanese troops and suspected collaborators. They all survived their mission in the jungle and returned home to Canada in February 1946, as seen in this photo taken by Vancouver Sun newspaper. Later that year, Low, King, Chan, and Shu were awarded the military medal for their efforts. On August 15, 1945, Japan officially surrendered. For many Chinese Canadians in Force 136, it meant it was time to go home. Others stayed in the field for a few more months to find and disarm isolated Japanese troops and to help maintain order during the post-war transition period. By the end of the war, 4 of the 13 men trained in Operation Oblivion would receive a medal as a result of their service in the armed forces. Sergeant Ray Sin Tui Chan, Sergeant Norman Munlo, Sergeant Jimmy Shu, and Sergeant Louis King would all receive the British Military Medal for bravery. The festival singers, under the direction of Miss Willoughby and accompanied by George Thurgood, will perform Pie Izu.
Like so many others, swept up in the excitement and patriotism that the First World War initially brought on, young Canadians were eager to serve king and country. At the time, however, the prejudiced attitudes of many of the people made it very difficult for these men to join the Canadian Army. Some Black Canadians did manage to join up during the opening years of the war. Black Canadians wanted the chance to do their part on a larger scale, however, and pressured the government to do so. On July 5, 1916, the No. 2 Construction Battalion was formed in Pictou, Nova Scotia, the first large Black military unit in Canadian history. Recruitment took place across the country, and more than 600 men were eventually accepted, most from Nova Scotia, with others coming from New Brunswick, Ontario, the North, and even some from the United States. The segregated battalion was tasked with non-combat support roles. After initial service in Canada, the battalion boarded the SS Southland, bound for Liverpool, England, in March 1917. Its members were sent to eastern France later in 1917, where they served honorably with the Canadian Forestry Corps. There, they helped provide the lumber required to maintain trenches on the front lines, as well as help construct roads and railways. After the end of the First World War in November 1918, the men sailed to Halifax in early 1919 to return to civilian life, and the unit was officially disbanded in 1920. In addition to the men of the Black Battalion, an estimated 2,000 Black Canadians were determined to get to the front lines and managed to join regular units, going on to give distinguished service that earned some of them medals for their bravery. Today, the dedicated service of the Black Battalion and other Black Canadians who fought in the First World War is remembered and celebrated as a cornerstone of the proud tradition of Black military service in our country.
Indigenous peoples have a long history of defending Canada and supporting its war efforts abroad. During the First World War, for example, participation by Canada's Indigenous peoples was proportionally higher than that of any other group in Canada, with 1 in 3 Indigenous males enlisting as foot soldiers, scouts, or snipers. In one instance, every male of the Nowish Reserve on Jurgen Bay enlisted, as did all but 3 on the Golden Lake Reserve. More than 500 Indigenous soldiers died in World Wars I and II. Altogether, more than 7,000 status natives and 5,000 non-status natives, along with a large number of Métis and Inuit people, left their homes and families to serve Canada in those 2 conflicts. Many Aboriginal women served as nurses tending the wounded, and those who remained in Canada also made important contributions, donating over $67,000 to war relief through the Red Cross and Salvation Army, and offering up reserve land for use as defense posts, airports, and training grounds. At the time, Aboriginal soldiers were highly praised for their courage and recognized for their frontline efforts. Many were decorated with honors and awards.
For the Fallen by Lawrence Binion. With proud thanksgiving, a mother for her children, England mourns for her dead across the sea. Flesh of her flesh they were, spirit of her spirit, fallen in the cause of the free. Solemn the drums thrill, death august and royal, sings sorrow up into immortal spheres. There's music in the midst of desolation, and a glory that shines upon our tears. They went with songs to the battle. They were young, straight of limb, true of eye, steady and aglow. They were staunch to the ends against odds uncounted. They fell with their faces to the foe. They shall grow not old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning we will remember them. They mingle not with their laughing comrades again. They sit no more at the familiar tables of home. They have no lot in our labor of daytime. They sleep beyond England's foam. But where our desires are and our hopes profound, felt as a wellspring that is hidden from sight, to the innermost heart of their own land they are known as the stars are known tonight. As the stars that shall be bright when we are dust, moving in marches upon the heavenly plain, as the stars that are starry in the time of our darkness, to the end they remain.
At this time, we would like to ask that everyone please rise for the laying of the wreath and a moment of silence. We also ask that everyone remain standing for the national anthem following Reveille. Thank you for joining us today. We ask that all students now return to their Period 2 classes.